Hi there, this is the week 6 video for the course. So today we're going to start Module 2. Now if you'll recall, in Module 1 what we primarily focused on was what we call human inference. And human inference is what we infer based on the information we were given. In Module 2 and Module 3 we're going to focus more on what's called statistical inference, and so this is going to be stuff you would typically think of seeing in a statistics course. So we're going to cover 3 main ideas today. First, we're going to look at how to collect data, and then we're going to look at who to collect data from, and then we're going to look at how to select those people that we're going to collect the data from. So there's lots and lots of ways to collect data that you want to analyze and that you want to work with. We're going to look at surveys is what we're going to start by looking at today, and surveys are a very common way to collect data from people. So the first thing we're going to look at today is how to write a good survey. Because how good your survey is written is going to dictate how good the information you get from it is. And by good information, I don't mean the information says what you want it to say, I just mean whether or not that information is valid. And so we're going to look at things like biased questions and the way that questions are worded and how that can affect how people are going to answer, and maybe not give the answer that they really want to give. The other thing we're going to look at today is something that's called push polls. So just because you get something that looks like a survey, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is collecting data from it. There are these marketing tools that are the guise of surveys, and those are called push polls, and you'll see these around election times especially, so I'm going to have you look at an example of those. So that's going to be the first thing you're going to do, is look at surveys. The next thing you're going to look at is, so if you're going to collect data from surveys, you need to know who you're going to collect the data from. And so in the second part, we're going to introduce 4 of probably the most important vocabulary words we have for the course. They are parameter, population, sample, and statistic. So by the end of the day, you really want to have a firm grasp on these 4 concepts. And so just to kind of talk about them really briefly, and you're going to do a lot of work with them, the population, that's going to be the group that you want to learn about. So let's say you're going to want to go give a survey and you're trying to collect information and you're curious about learning about all people that live in the United States. Well, in that case, all people in the United States are going to be your population. Or let's say instead of all people in the United States, you're only interested in people that live in the state of Kentucky. Well, in that case, people that live in the state of Kentucky are going to be your population. So the population, that's the name that we give the big group that we're actually interested in learning about. Now usually that group is really big and it's impossible to look at all of the people or all of the things in that group, so we're going to look at a small set of them, and that's what we call the sample. And you actually already looked a little bit at the idea of population and sample in Module 1. So let's say again I'm interested in learning about all people that live in the state of Kentucky, and I take a sample of 100 of them. Well, those 100 people would be my sample. Now what we want to learn about the population, that's going to be what we call the parameter. So for example, let's say I'm interested in all people that live in the state of Kentucky. In particular, let's make that even a little bit smaller. Let's say I'm only interested in adults that are of voting age that live in the state of Kentucky. So that would be my population. And let's say that I want to know what % of them are going to vote in the upcoming primaries. Now, that percentage, that's what we call the parameter, and that's because that's going to be a percentage out of a whole population. Now, since I can't go talk to everyone, I can't, see what everyone is doing, especially since this is something that's going to occur in the future, I don't know the actual value of that percentage or that parameter, but I do know that it's out there, I just don't know what it is. So instead what I do is I go and I talk to 100 people. Now those 100 people, I ask them, hey, how many of you are going to vote in the upcoming primaries? And whatever that value is, let's say that 70% of them said they were going to vote in the primaries. That 70% is what we call a statistic. So the statistic is a value that comes from the sample. What we're going to focus on here for the rest of the semester is we're going to focus on taking that statistic, so in other words that value taken from a small number of people, and we're going to try to use that value to help us learn about the parameter, which is that value taken from all of the people that we're interested in. So that's going to be one of our primary ideas moving forward, is how can we use the statistic to learn about the parameter. So that's going to be the second idea you look at. Like I said, we're going to mainly just look at those 4 vocabulary words, make sure you get a firm grasp on them, and then the rest of the semester is going to be looking at using the statistic to learn about the parameter. And then the very last thing we're going to do today is we're going to look at, well, how do we select that sample from the population? If we're interested in all people that live in the state of Kentucky, how do I select those 100 people that I'm going to talk to? And there's lots of ways to do that, but in order to have valid statistical inference, we have to have what's called a random sample. Now there are different types of random samples, but we're going to focus on what is called a simple simple random sample. And so the last part of today's work is going to be looking at the definition of what a simple random sample is. And then later on in the course, we're going to see why taking a simple random sample is so important, why we have to have that for valid statistical inference. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will be around to answer questions, and have a great week.